society is kind of hitting its limits.
We have this potential that we can create something that might potentially change the world.
We need to do something a bit disruptive, not just for NTT, but for mankind. So, it is saying, it just disappeared, but March 15th and 16th, we are planning this event called Upgrade 2023. And this is the event to showcase that IWON itself, and also that the NTT R&D's the more recent activities. So our plan is that we are going to use this space where you are for the exhibit of that demos, and 15 or so demo is going to be placed here. So that's going to be the first day, the 15th. And the 16th, we're going to do basically the full-day session to talk about the latest and greatest R&D activities from my team members, and also that NTT's different operating companies, their innovation officers coming in to talk about how they implement those R&D activities into that to the business. So please come if you're available for those days. So that's promotion side.
Thank you, Komi-san. Yeah. Commercial for Komi-san. I'll bill you later. So what you saw there were clips from our R&D forum in Japan, and one of the big things that we're on a mission, and Komi-san and that's myself and the team, is to bring more of our message from Japan to the rest of the world. And so we know what's going on, we see the incredible things, and so my job and our job is to bring Japan and NTT to the rest of the world. With your help, hopefully we can do that. All right, so you guys can hear me okay? That's on the names, mic, okay? Okay. All right, so I wanted to, thank you. I'm going to take you through a long story in a short time, if I can do that, and hopefully get more light shed on who is this NTT. And so I'll talk about the NTT group and kind of our history and our organizational structure, and then I'll touch on IWON more from a kind of what's our vision and what are we trying to achieve, and like I said, then Komi-san will take you into some more detail. So NTT stands for Nippon Telegraph and Telephone, for those who might have been wondering. And we were born almost 150 years, just over 150 years ago, when the Japanese government chose to assign certain departments within the government with a mission. And that mission for different departments, one was education, one was science, one was health. Our mission, given to us by the government, was to connect people in Japan, people and businesses. We didn't have the words that we have today, but the idea of connecting people is at the core of who we are. And that, of course, has become a much bigger organization and a much bigger story. But given that mission, the first technology was telegraph. That's the first T in the NTT. And we began with the telegraph, just like they were also available here in the US. And that was a phenomenal technology at the time. Actually, I'll show you the timeline here. So it was going all the way back, the first telegraph between Tokyo and Yokohama. I'm going to go this way so I can read it. And so that was in 1869. And we began basically from 1869 all the way through the 50s. We went telegraph, telephone, and we really started to improve the quality and the service of the telephone. So as you can imagine, this was a government department whose mission and charge was to provide quality services to the Japanese society. So I say that because you'll see later how that DNA is still with NTT. And so as we built that organization, we, of course, between 1869 and 50s, there was a couple of wars, there's a lot going on. But once we hit the 50s, NTT was a very big part of rebuilding Japan, and rebuilding Japan into a global technology leader. So in 1952, the government decided to make a public corporation, wholly owned, called Nippon Telegraph and Telephone. And we ran as a publicly owned corporation for the next 20, 30 years. In the meantime, we were inventing and innovating, even in 1970 in Osaka, which, by the way, I'll mention later about Osaka 2025, it's coming back, where we exhibited a video telephone and a wireless telephone at the Japan World Exhibition. And we are holding, the World Exhibition is a separate company, and it is coming to Osaka in 2025, and we're going to showcase new technologies based on IOWN and hoping to make the same impact that we had in 1970. So we laid the groundwork for the connected future, talking about different networks, started the intelligent infrastructure and digital switching. I have a little bit of history in the IT industry. I'm not going to get into the technology because I wouldn't, but I know importantly, connecting people, business, and society was a big part of our goal. So what most people don't know is we didn't become a public company until 1985. And that's when our logo was born, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our logo later. So in 1985, we became a public company. However, we still have partial ownership by the Japanese government. And the deal was with the mission or the law that was set was that we'll allow you to be a public organization. We will keep something like 32%. However, you must continue to deliver high quality, always available network services in Japan. So we have a commitment in our charter that says we must always deliver highest quality, always connected networking. They said as long as you do that, you can do any other business that you want. And so that opened the door to who we became today. Because if we just stuck to telephone, we would just be still doing telephone switching. By having that charter, we then began to do all of these other things that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. We bought an IT services, we created an IT services company called NTT Data. We started NTT Docomo, which is mobile communications. We reorganized into East, West, and Communications, which is in Japan. And I'm going to show you all this in an organizational structure. And then we started to become more acquisitive outside of Japan. And we acquired IT services in different kinds of companies, Dimension Data, Keen. We bought Dell's IT services business. We created a new company in 2019 called NTT Limited, which was the first NTT branded company outside of Japan. NTT only branded. Until then, we had NTT Communications. And then last year, we created this company called NTT Data Inc. I'm going to show you that organizational structure now and try to put it in a way that is easy to understand. First, I want to give you an idea of the size and scope and who we are. So we're over 330,000 employees, of which over 40% of them are outside of Japan. So we are a Japanese company, yet we have something like 140,000 employees outside of Japan. Now, we're a top 55 Fortune Global 100. We have a physical presence in 80 countries. We deliver network services to 190 countries. Again, probably something that most people don't know. 108 billion in revenue, pretty significant, of which, again, about 20% of that is outside of Japan. And that's a big number, but we want it to be bigger. A high ranking in sustainability, top 5 global IT service provider. That means that we're in the same range as companies like Accenture, IBM, PwC, Deloitte, if you know that industry. We're in the top 5 in that space, revenue-wise. And high level of brand finance and 150 years of heritage. We're also very proud of these numbers. We have obviously, well, maybe not obviously to everyone, but we are one of the largest data center providers in the world. We were very large before, and we continue to invest, and now we've actually created a data center company as well as many partnerships to continue to fund, because building data centers is very expensive, but it turned out, of course, to be a really smart thing to do as the pandemic hit and the capacity required for data centers went through the roof. 5,000 R&D professionals, some here in Silicon Valley, many in Japan, but all over the world. 3.6 billion in R&D investment. Pretty significant because when we say R&D, we'll probably get some questions about this. We're talking about primary research, like fundamental research, and not whether this supply chain or that supply chain is better. We do that as well, but that's inside the operating companies. 18,000 patents, and another stat that we're very proud of is the IP backbone, where a lot of the world's internet traffic goes over our network. And that's a very big responsibility as well as a big opportunity for us. So that's NTT by the numbers. Let me show you the structure. We have been restructuring recently. One of the biggest we've had two big restructurings in the last 2 years. The biggest one was NTT Docomo. NTT Docomo is the mobile operator, 85 million subscribers in Japan, 45 billion in revenue. And they were a public company, and we owned, I think, just over 50%. We privatized them 2 years ago. It was the largest privatization, merger, acquisition in Japanese history. Cost us like 50, 60 billion, I can't remember. But it was an important step, and I'll talk later about why it's important that Docomo is now fully part of the NTT family. As well, we have NTT Communications, which is our enterprise networks and solutions business, Gomi-san's old home, and a very important part of our business as well. And then NTT Comware, which is a systems and software development company. So these companies, I show you there as 45 billion in revenue, and I say Japan and global. A very small part of it is global. But the goal and the ambition and the investment plan is to bring more of Docomo to the rest of the world. Not as a mobile operator, but as a platform provider, as a technology provider, and also some services, but mostly in the B2B world, supporting the B2C. In Japan, of course, it's a very strong B2C brand, doing obviously as a mobile operator, but doing a lot of content creation, video streaming. The plan is not to do that necessarily outside of Japan, but to provide the technologies that are going to help do that. Whether it's Metaverse or Web3 or O-RAN or whatever the next 6G is, that's where we're going to contribute. So that's 45 billion. NTT East and West are the local businesses in Japan. So I don't know how to compare it here. So basically they provide consumer and small medium business services. So the internet to the home, as well as some hosting for small businesses, local telecom, broadband network, and IT solutions. So they provide that to the east and west of all of Japan, but all the enterprise business is inside that first segment, mobile network services, enterprise networks and solutions. So that's about 25 billion. This is another restructuring that just happened called NTT Data. NTT Data Japan and NTT Data Global. You'll see there's two different looking brands. Same company, but just different divisions, if you will. So the NTT Data Global brand is about a $20 billion IT services company. And again, that's the one who 20 billion outside of Japan and 8 billion in Japan. So when I say 28 billion, again, that compares to companies, like I said, like IBM or Accenture or PwC, and that puts us in the top 5. And the last group, which when I did this, I had forgotten how much we have in this, but we have 10 billion in revenue in a lot of other companies, which are all doing very interesting things. Urban Solutions is a real estate development company. We actually own properties here in the US as well. And the connection is to take buildings and technology and put them together to make them smart buildings and technology-driven buildings. So Urban Solutions is a big investor. There's a lot in Australia, and I believe in Malaysia, and Japan, of course, and we've entered the US as well. NTT Anode Energy is an interesting company as well because it's a power grid distribution company as well as a power generating company. And so if those of you who are old enough to remember the telephone switching houses that were in all of our neighborhoods, you remember those houses that nobody knew who lived in, that no one walked into? They're still there, right? So we had 7,000 of those. We have 7,000 of those in Japan. And one of the ideas that Sawada-san, who was our chairman now, came up with is, how can we use these to contribute to society? Because again, back to our founding, we have all these assets, how can we use them? So the idea and the implementation is to make those solar energy generating stations. So now each one of those has become a local solar energy generating, and we're selling energy back to the grid, but we're also using it for our own electronic fleets, because of course we're going fully electronic in all of our fleets, which I can't remember how many tens of thousands of vehicles we have. So that's an example of how we turn something that looked like it was end of road into a sustainable contribution to Japanese society. So that's NTT Anode Energy, but it's also something we want to do more externally, globally. And then there's a number of other businesses all adding up to 10 billion. And at the bottom there, you see, I don't mean to make that last because it's not, but it is a very important part, and that's the research and development group. So the research and development group is contributing to innovations and technologies. And, you know, again, I said one of my jobs is to bring this message to the world. And as I dug into the R&D mission and goals and what they're trying to do, it's all fundamentally based on the idea of contributing to a sustainable world. Everything we do in our R&D is about sustainability, not just necessarily net zero, by the way, because we look at sustainability in three lights. There's obviously net zero, there's the well-being and health of people, and then there's prosperity of the world. So there are things that we're doing in all three of those areas to contribute. And R&D is kind of our levers, if you will, for us to build on and pull and help contribute to the rest of the world. So it's a very, very, again, DNA part of who we are is to do R&D for the good of society because it has been good for our business. And we believe and know that that will continue to be the case. I know the rest of the world is catching up to that idea and how that there's the multi-stakeholder approach, but we've always had that view, and we just need to get more people to come on board with that view. So that's NTT organizational structure, simple, 108 billion or so. Any questions? Just to clarify, and know everybody gets exactly who we are? All right. Yes.
You say 108 billion now.
Yes.
What's that been in the last 5 years?
So it depends on the yen. Last year it was 112 because the yen was lower. So literally we've been growing for the last, earnings per share has been growing for the last 10 years. Revenue is, it's hard to say because again, based on the yen in dollars, but we've had steady but very slow growth. And that's the challenge we have as a company is what do we do to drive growth? And that's hence R&D.
Are the factors that affect the B2C market, kind of US and elsewhere in the world, are they the same sort of factors that affect in Japan?
The B2C market?
Yeah, because right now we're going through a sort of downturn and we're seeing revenues decreasing in B2C tech, so.
I mean, the challenge in a single market is that it's very hard to gain significant share. And so the Docomo, KDDI, and Rakuten and SoftBank.
Sorry, the question is more about are the pressures in that market similar to what we see, what we used to?
Pricing pressures?
Just general.
General? No, it's still a pretty healthy market. There's been some pricing pressure, so there's been some cost reductions, or sorry, price reductions that we, interestingly, in Japan, because it's a society based on harmony, the Japanese government felt that the mobile operators were charging too much, and so the mobile operators dropped their prices. No law, no directive, they just dropped their prices. So it became very competitive, but it's still extremely healthy business for us. But like maybe what you're saying here is, we're investing in new services because in order to get incremental growth, we're not going to do it with subscribers. So there's a lot more services that we're investing. Now, I said I wasn't going to answer questions that I didn't note, so I have people who can answer that question for you. We actually had the CEO of NTT Docomo here a few weeks ago, and he's very excited about bringing his message to the global market. So I'm sure we can find somebody to answer your questions. Thanks. Yes.
Quick, while you're talking about the structure of the company, I was interested in following NTT disruption for a little while.
Yes.
That is no longer a thing, right?
No.
Go into what happened there?
Yeah, so NTT Disruption are the guys who built this place actually. So NTT Disruption was a small company of about 50 to 100 people. It was part of the NTT Limited organization, which is now part of NTT Data. And the idea didn't fully pan out, and so after 3 years, we shut it down. However, we still have our VC investments. So we have a VC here in Silicon Valley that has a $500 million available line from us. But NTT Disruption the ideas have been merged back into the operating business as opposed to a separate individual company. So that's what we did. We took that IP and moved it back into the operating company.
And now it's organized under NTT Data.
Under NTT Data. And actually, funny enough, that came from NTT Data. It came from actually Europe, NTT Data Europe. We took it out of NTT Data and created this company, and it didn't work to the way it should have, and so we moved it back in. great. Good question. Anything else? So if you're wondering where I am, Gomi-san is in a company called NTT Research, which is a US-based incorporated company. I'm actually in a company that's not showing here called NTT Corporation. So at the top of this, there's a corporation that is we call it a holding company. So all of these operate as, we call them OpCos, and then there's a holding company level, very small group, which is where I am, and where I was appointed global CMO 6 months ago, which never existed before. So back to the commitment of moving and driving the entity message globally. No one of these companies has the mission of the whole entity group. So that's our mission, but of course we work very closely with all of these companies. Sorry, I think I just hit your microphone.
Okay. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So some of the really cool initiatives that I had the chance to meet with you guys in Japan a couple months ago about was artificial photosynthesis, there was the lightning drones. Where does that sort of greater sustainability-centric stuff fit into?
So that comes from the R&D group. So what you saw was the video. You might have recognized some of those pictures.
Yeah.
So the R&D group builds those kinds of ideas and then works with the OpCos, the different what we call channels, if you will, to take them to market. So it's not a commercialization organization, it's a true R&D organization, fundamental research, and then ultimately the way this should work, and it does work, is we take that and then commercialize it in these organizations. So it lives in 3.6 billion, which is where ION is, which I'm going to talk about next. Anything else? All right, so one last thing, I had to throw this in here. You know, a lot of icons have meanings, whether it's a Nike icon or an Amazon, they all have a kind of meaning. Our icon has a meaning. It's not just somebody who drew a bunch of circles. It's actually based on the Fibonacci sequence, which is a naturally occurring in nature. And it was designed by a very famous artist in Japan. And the way it comes together is it brings art, science, and nature into harmony, which is really at the core of our mission as well. And so by looking at this, you can see how it's a naturally occurring. We have two circles. We talk about the small loop in the middle, representing the voice of people and clients and society, and the larger loop representing the continuous curve of innovation and dynamism. And I want to point out at the bottom here, in 1985, when we became a public company and this logo was born, this is the English, the English translation of the Japanese words that were published. We aim to become a human company that is truly useful to the world by keeping people as the starting point of our thinking, always thinking about the future and continuing to innovate dynamically. So that is written in stone in our charter and in our DNA. So that's our logo. We're very proud of it and very happy with it. All right, so ION. As I said yesterday, not the greatest word. Wouldn't win any brand awards for for naming. But the words, each word is very important. Innovative optical and wireless network. It's not the innovative optical wireless network. It's and wireless network. But the curious thing about ION when it first started coming out, just like I spent some time in the industry and I worked at IBM for many years, and when I was there during the transition of Lou Gerstner, he came into IBM and he came from Nabisco and Cookies and American Express, and he was learning the business. And at that time, IBM was getting their kicked by this thing called client server, and we didn't have a client server solution. So Lou Gerstner, in his simple way of looking at the world, he says, well, we should sell more client server. And we had to explain to him that you can't buy client server. It's a whole continuum of technologies, whether it's a PC, a server, a network, a memory. My point is that you can't buy ION. We don't sell ION. If you were to ask me for a delivery of ION tomorrow, I can't sell you ION. It's a concept, but it's also got reality-based technologies. So I just want to make that clear in case somebody thinks we're selling ION. We're not. We're building on ION. And there's many things that we're going to build on it that we'll talk about between the two of us. So the ION technology, first of all, just to set up, why are we even doing this? So we know the world is approaching limits. There's only so much we can do with the current infrastructure. And we know that because We see all the strains on computing, and we're finding lots of shortcuts and ways to eliminate those strains, but they're all shortcuts. We haven't opened up the next generation of the internet, or as I call it, the next internet. So as we approach these limits, we're running into power consumption and bandwidth requirements that are starting to hit the wall. Now, even though we say, well, this 5G is supposed to solve all that, but it only solved one part of the problem. It didn't solve the feed into it, and it didn't change the technology in the actual device. But it made everything between go faster. Well, that's not enough, right? You got to do the whole thing end to end. So we believe there's going to need to be exponentially advances in technology. And the next internet is going to be a disruptive innovation. If you know the disruptive innovation model, typically means that it's something that probably doesn't work that well now. Nobody really knows what it is. It starts out very small, and it starts to become more meaningful as it changes the way things are done. IOWN changes the way the internet is done, and that's what we're going to talk about. And in the end, we still want to do this to solve social issues and contribute to sustainability, a very key part of why we're doing this. So, what is IOWN? Very simply, it's moving from electronics to photonics. Photonics is not new. We've had fiber optics since the 60s. We know fiber optics, we've used it for transmission. But now taking photonics to a different level and making it more pervasive, not just in networks, but in devices, between devices, within devices. And so this new communication, we call it communication and computing platform, because it consists of all photonic networks, which is silicon photonics, edge computing, wireless networks, distributed computing. You can see why it was difficult to name this thing, because it covers so much of the industry, and again, we'll talk about it. But one of the key kind of gating factors was we wanted to invent and innovate a technology that contributed to sustainability, because we know the whole net zero power, we're not going to get there by turning down the lights or running more LED. We're going to need some kind of technology to change, to make our way to net zero. We can't get there with the current technologies. That's, I think most people are agreeing that that's the case. So we already have some commercialization plans for 2023. We'll finalize specs by 2024, and I'll talk about the IOWN Global Forum as part of that, and we'll realize the full initiative by 2030. Are these guarantees? Are these 100% certain? No. They're hugely ambitious, and as I said last night, if we get anywhere near this, 50% near to this, it'll be an amazing, amazing accomplishment. So we're going to keep a high bar. I can tell you that the pressure, and Kobe-san knows this as well, from the top down, from Sawada-san, who is the father, if you will, of IOWN, Kawazoe-san, who is brother of IOWN. But those two guys in 2019 is when we started this whole concept of moving everything to photonics, and we'll talk about that. So, maybe this is, I don't have to go over this ground again, but what is IOWN? You know already now, Innovative Optical and Wireless Network. It's an initiative for future computing. The three key elements that we keep repeating is ultra high capacity, ultra low latency, with ultra low power. It's like the holy grail. If we can reduce power significantly while increasing capacity significantly and have low latency, we've solved many of the issues of the internet today. And so that's what the goal is for IOWN. Why do we need it? We talked about the exponential growth in data, in our power, in our energy grids, in our platforms. I mean, I keep hearing that the energy grids are teetering, and we're actually limited how much we can do, even though we're incrementally doing more. But we think there's a lot more that the industry wants to do. And just starting with AI, but all the real IoT that has to come and all the sensors that really need to connect and talk to each other, we're still a ways away from that. And we need some new next internet to do that. And then finally, it'll have impact, and we'll have more talk about that, but 4D digital platforms, with the fourth dimension being time, space integrated computing, which is satellites going around the world and connecting to the Earth through photonics, creating zero latency entertainment. So gaming today is, as much as it seems to be real time as now, there's still latency. We haven't fully removed that. And then there's some more things on quantum technology, and you mentioned the genome editing of seaweed and fish that what you saw, I think, is as well at the forum. So these are some of the things that we're trying to do with IAM. So now I'm going to give you the 3 fundamental components and the 3 service platforms that we talked about for IAM. Probably shouldn't have put this all on one page, but let's try and do it together. So the 3 fundamental technologies, if you will, are all-photonic networks, digital twin computing, and cognitive foundation. How am I doing for time? Am I still okay? Yeah. This might be my last or second to last slide, but it's a big slide. So the all-photonics network is essentially, as I said, driving photonics down to the device level. And we have 4 stages. Gomi-san is going to talk about them. But it starts with connecting communication devices. Then you go to connecting boards with photonics. Then you connect chips with photonics. And then you have photonics in the chips themselves. Now, we're not a chip maker. So again, these are enabling technologies that we want to bring to the world. But that's an important part of it, is having an all-photonic network is what is fundamentally different about the next internet. Digital twin computing, we've heard a lot about that. You need some of this all-photonics, but we believe that digital twins are not just creating individual digital twins, but in digital twins that collaborate with each other. Because if you create individual digital twins, it's interesting, but until they start collaborating with each other, you don't get the benefit of that. So an example would be, I was trying to think of good examples, but one might be weather, traffic, and events. You can have digital twins of the weather, because we have all of that data. You can have a digital twin of a city and the traffic patterns, and you can have a digital twin of an event where there's going to be people. You can now predict, based on all 3 of those, which are also predictive, what could happen when all those 3 things happen together. So the idea behind that is to have a more predictive capability and anticipate outcomes. You can do the same with medical development, health drug development, many different kinds of things that you can use it for. But that's a big one. And then the third one is the cognitive foundation, which is kind of the brains behind it. So all of this has to be managed. The resources, when you dig deeper into this, you're going to see that the resources are what we call disaggregated, not distributed, disaggregated, meaning that they'll be connected to each other, working with each other, but they'll be in different places. And so you need some kind of ability to have an understanding of where those resources are, where you need to move them to using digital twin and predictive technology based on photonic networks and low latency, high speed networks. So those 3 are kind of foundational, but again, you can't buy any of those. Those are technologies. We then look at what we call service platforms to say, well, if you can do that, what are some things that you would think about changing in the way that networking and computing happens today? So data-centric computing is using computing where data is at the hub instead of CPUs. And so today, very much our computing model is CPU-based or server-based or technology-based. The idea here is to create the disaggregated computing model. I think I mentioned this yesterday. So I come from the industry, been working for a lot of different companies. The goal has always been, how can we get CPUs, GPUs, whatever the PUs are called, to talk to each other faster and get more output. And there's always gating factors, and the gating factor is typically electronics. And so if you can remove electrons and electronics as the gating factor and increase the speed and capacity of communications, you increase the processing power multiple times. And so we call that disaggregated computing, where you can have a GPU, a CPU, and a memory. They don't have to be in the same unit, same building, same city. If you have photonics that moves at low latency, this can connect anywhere and can be moved around in a much more dynamic way. It sounds futuristic, but it's actually based on true technical thinking. Extreme Network as a Service is the idea of integrating fixed and wireless. And as much as we are happy with our wireless today, it's still nowhere near where it can be, because it's not connected all the time. Wireless, if you wanted to do autonomous vehicles today, there's no way to do it. We don't have enough network capacity or bandwidth to do that. So in order to do that, you're going to have an extreme network that is always connected, always on, and never fails. Otherwise, we'll never be able to do these things we talk about, like autonomous vehicles. Or, for example, robots that are going to serve people in real time. Or telemedicine, where you have a virtual doctor in a home. You need absolute extreme network capabilities to do that. And then the next one is photonic direct communications. This one is also taking photonics point to point. And if you can do that, especially in things like medicine, operating rooms, e-gaming, it's funny how life and death in games are actually served with the same technology. But that's what that's meant to do, is to give you the direct, high-speed, low-latency communications. So, high level, I know. We will get examples of that with Gomi-san's presentation, and we'll hear more about how we bring these to life, and plan to bring them to life. Something we realized, and every company should realize this, otherwise they go out of business, is that you cannot introduce a revolutionary new technology without a whole lot of partnerships. It's just not possible. It used to be possible, but even then, those companies that did it are all gone. So we have a very strong belief that we need to do this through and with the industry, not by ourselves. And so we and Sony and Intel, as the founding members, created the IOWN Global Forum, which is essentially like an industry standards body. It's only been around for, I think, two or 3 years, but we already have over 100 members. And just to give you an idea of who the members are. So this global forum has a number of initiatives where, and I've gone to some of these meetings, there's a lot of technical, what do they call them? Not workshops, but work groups, looking into all the facets, because when we talk about these things, obviously there's a whole lot of work that has to go into standardization and interfaces, and so some of the examples, Ciena and Cisco and those kind of companies are looking at how can they implement photonics in their network devices. Or companies like Dell, how can you think about photonics in servers and in storage? So this group here, Nokia is another big one, Ericsson. This group here constantly works on, and I've seen, you can go to the, I can't remember what the website is, I think it's iownglobalforum.com or something like that, look them up. But this group here is working very hard towards creating industry standards around IOWN. And that's important to us because without this, it will not succeed. 100% will not succeed without the support of the industry. So that's my last slide. I'm not going to show you the appendix because, oh shoot. Sorry, Gomi-san. Sorry, man. Sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Those are there for my purposes. Any questions? Yes.
So what's the difference between a sponsor member, general member, affiliate member? Is it just how much they pay?
It's not just how much they pay, it's how much they're involved in influencing the standard. So they get to attend different committees and get to have different positions in those committees. And there is a difference in payment, but I don't think money is the issue. It's more how much time they're willing to commit.
Is this not a problem with too many cooks?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. You need to have this level of collaboration to get adoption. And so, yeah, it's slow because you have a lot of people positioning themselves, but the more you put into it, the more, theoretically you'll get out of it if and when it succeeds. But yeah, I've seen huge competitors, Ciena and Cisco, for example, or Ericsson, but we're managing it. And some of these guys spend more time than others, just like every other industry body. But it's quite a diverse group. The one thing you'll notice missing, and I'll ask the question if you haven't noticed it, is where are the end users? And so there is a very strong drive to recruit more end users because we need the business requirements. And we can think of some, we know some, but a lot of these people are technical, very deep technical engineers. So I think we want to think about another category called the end users, and we have a few. At the last one I went to, we had a construction company in Japan who's trying to understand how should they build their future buildings based on this kind of technology. So that is one of the goals. And the other one is to get more participation from American companies. Once again, our role here is to get that message out. Even though you have American companies listed here, our goal is to get more of their US-based organizations engaged with this. There's the interest, but interest is different than commitment. Yes?
So, with this being about ION, I kind of half expected you to have an Intel spokesperson as only spokesperson here, but we're still going to hear with NTT's very specific viewpoint of what ION is and what NTT is doing.
Yeah.
How do we differentiate between what you're doing and what is going to be you guys want to do versus what the whole forum wants to do in that aspect? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's something that it's on my agenda to have an ION Global Forum here with all these members. And when we have these global forums, even though we're founding, we're not on stage. We're on stage for like 10% of the time. So I guess what you're seeing here is the NTT message to first inform people of ION, but I agree, we have to get these people to also represent it well, otherwise we won't succeed. So there will be an ION Global Forum, the next one's in Japan in April, but I've been lobbying very hard with these teams to bring it here to Silicon Valley. That'll be a big thing.
So, sorry, my comment was more about just this little press tour.
This one?
Yeah, but because Intel's just down the road, surely something.
Well, yeah, I guess like I said, we're in steps. There are many people who didn't even know we existed, so we wanted to start with that step.
Okay.
But yeah, Intel is down the road. But actually, your point on Intel is another, in total honesty, the Intel we have, even though it's Intel, the representative is from Japan.
The Intel Labs Japan.
Well, the Intel representative on our board
Okay.
is from Japan. What we need is an Intel representative here in Silicon Valley. Now, our chairman, Sawada-san, and Pat at Intel are in constant conversation. So they are talking, but going from that level to getting people to show up and talk about this is going to take time.
Okay.
But I take your point well. It is
They've
a
got
credibility
photographs
issue.
down in South Bay, so.
Yeah, we're here. Yeah, well, Cisco and a lot of these guys are here. Yeah.
I have a question. How far do you take the initiative? Do you take it to silicon? Do you take it to a set of standards? Do you take it to proof of concept
We
demos?
as NTT?
Or the community, the ION community?
It's far from being in Silicon. It's far from being.
Is the end game to put?
Yes, yeah. You'll see the one that I showed you quickly. He'll show you the path for Silicon. But again, it won't be us. Now we're not a chip maker, but we just announced a couple of things that are interesting maybe to you. One is we announced a joint venture in Japan called Rapidus, which is a joint venture between a number of companies. I think Intel is included, NEC, Fujitsu, and it's a company that's intended to focus on chip development, the next generation of chip development. And we put in tens of millions of dollars. The government's put in 500 million. And then of course we have a relationship with the U.S. And so the other thing I haven't mentioned, and maybe it's too subtle or not subtle enough, is there's a very strong bond being created between Japan's technology industry and the U.S. technology industry. And that's not just a technical thing, that's a geopolitical thing. So there's a strong need to have a representative in Asia, a friendly ally in Asia called Japan, and the U.S. And now you saw recently the agreement between Japan, Netherlands, and the U.S. to limit access to certain types of technologies to those who are allies. And you can imagine who's not at this point. So, yeah. Yes.
So you bring up a good point, and I had a question because it's sort of reflected in this document ranking. NTT's culture is about doing good for global society. That would necessitate a close interaction with government and a focus on policies and laws. That's clearly lacking here.
Yes.
And when you talk about society, some would think you're talking about global society, but what about global, quote, global government?
Yes.
And how does ION address that, or is that something that's outside of the scope?
Good question. It's not outside the scope. It's actually quite relevant to the scope of ION. And as part of a recent change, we now have I think this is the right name, a Department of Economic Security. And we have a gentleman there, Yananasi-san, who reports directly into the CEO, whose job is to reach, and he's an ex-government official from the Abe-san leadership. His job is to reach out to global organizations, again, allies, and align on the laws and the agreements and the friendships, if you want to call it that, so that as we build this technology, we build it in a way that it's not going to be used in the wrong way. So this chart maybe is confusing because this is not NTT, but we have a Department of Economic Security, and I know that's not the right name, but his job is to understand what are the geopolitical risks to Japan and the rest of the world. And our chairman, again, I quote him a lot, but he's very, very concerned about the world and how it's becoming more divisive. And a lot of our technology is intended to remove some of that divisiveness and create technologies that are more accessible to all. But you can't do it without some very strong agreements with very strong allies. So we're committed to that. In fact, just yesterday, he was interviewed in Nikkei in Japan, where he spoke exactly to that. And by the way, he was critical of both global governments who are not moving fast enough to ensure global security. He's critical of the Japanese government as well for not moving fast. Governments don't move fast with technology. And so he knows the problems and he's putting them out there, but it takes time for governments to change.
Vito.
Yeah.
So hearing the vision, hearing the consortium, the forum, what do you make, or do you have an opinion about the lack of Western, so North American, South American, or European carriers in this chart? You've got the infrastructure providers.
For recruiting, I mean, yeah, we don't have a lot, you're right. I think that would be a good example of an end user, because those telecoms.
Well, you have SK, you have,
right.
Of course, NTT, and you have, I'm just.
Yeah, no, the recruitment is not done. Yeah, we haven't recruited them yet.
But wouldn't you use, because you and I both came from Cisco, very strong alliances, wouldn't you use the influence of these founding members to influence the AT&Ts, the Verizons, the British Telecoms?
Yeah, we have to, we will. We don't have that done yet. I think, again, I'm being perfectly honest, having come from Japan first, doesn't have enough of the Western, I don't want to say aggressiveness, but the Western point of view, and we need to embed more of that, and that's something that this board knows, and I've told them as well. So yeah, we're still working on that. And if we don't, by the way, if we don't do that, this will collapse. It's not good enough to just have Asian carriers and representatives from Japan.
Well, just remember, back to the Cisco example, 50% of the revenue at a time I'm not up to date was from carriers,
right.
Global carriers, right? So
right.
It'd be interesting to see if you could pull the levers. And again, we don't know if all the sponsor members have the Japanese representatives and not their counterparts.
Most of the Sienna, the equipment guys, Sienna and Nokia are very involved.
Yeah.
They have top guys. Cisco doesn't yet.
Okay.
And it's, I think, because we're not doing enough to recruit and get this message out. But those guys are placing some bets. Sienna, Fujitsu, Nokia, Ericsson have been very strongly involved.
But those are, yep, of course, those are the Scandinavian.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Oh, go ahead. Question here?
No, I was just saying you have about 5.
Oh, yeah, he's shutting me down. Okay, sorry.
So it's one thing to do a forum and build standards. Obviously, some of these companies are competitors, so when it comes to developing IP and the collaborative/competitive nature of that.
Right.
I'm looking at the documents here, and it's still a few years out yet for a lot of these technologies.
Right.
Is that entering the mindset yet, or is it just still this sort of native, naive, collaborative discussion?
There have been, I haven't been privy to those discussions, but obviously this has to be a business. And our goal will be to license the IP. We don't necessarily want to own it all. Yeah, so from our perspective, it'll be licensed and it'll be available to others through a licensing fee. And there may be licenses from one company to another if they create something that others can use. So, but we haven't set that in stone. We're far from that. I don't know how far we are, but we first have to get this off the ground and working so that we're delivering something. And we have our next meeting where there are going to be some proof of concepts. So some of these companies are working on proof of concepts to show how it could happen and work. And once we start getting that, kind of momentum, then we'll start talking about IT.
So when you have these working groups working towards the individual business
Yeah.
standards, are there agreements in place regarding technology that's discussed within the group, made within the group, and how that's separated out, or is it still just individual? Like I say, it's hard to determine.
Yeah.
Kind of along that path you.
No, they're not. They're not going in there with lawyers.
Yeah.
They're engineers and technical people who are hammering out, can this even work and how would it work? They haven't begun, and so as far as I can see, nobody's showing up the lawyer yet. So they're still very much. But that'll change, and which that we hope, right? Because at that point we know we got something. Yes. Okay. I have one more question because I'm being. Yes.
It's just, you have a ton of companies here, just obviously not all of them are there as in the current stage that you're in. Are you aware, because obviously photonics is it's not a new technology. Are you aware if there's like other companies or other
Yes.
organizations working on something
There
that
are.
probably compete with what you're doing?
There are. Yeah. I don't know if there's another forum like this, but there are individual companies who are working on photonics. Some of them are members already. We know IBM is working on it. We know Intel is working on it. That's okay. We're not pretending to be able to invent it all. If they want to bring it together to get something more out of it, maybe they don't. But I think in my earlier statement is if you're not building something that is going to be an industry standard, then you're probably going to win for a while and then lose. And so, but there are others. But I have. Maybe you tell me. Have you guys heard of others?
No.
No. Oh. Okay, well then there's your answer, because I don't know of another global forum, but I do know there are people working on photonics. So that gives us a differentiator. I gotta go sell that.
Sorry, one small question.
Yeah.
Can we call this 6G or shall we not call this 6G?
No.
That is the question, does it?
No, you cannot call it 6G.
Oh, okay.
Call it the next internet, call it beyond 5G, don't
5G
call it the
plus.
next 6G. Oh yeah, right, it's not the next iPhone,
Okay, good.
it's the next internet.
Okay.
Web 4.0.
What's that?
Oh no.
We're making stuff up now?
That's a Web 4.0.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm
Oh,
trying
well.
to get my Netflix better, come on.
All right, with that, thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate that. Thank you, and turn it over to Mr.
Yeah, you're gonna take them out of there. I think you should.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We're very open. We're very open.
Do you want to take a quick time?
Oh, that might be, that's a small thing. Yeah, let's take a.
You guys want to take a break?
There's more drinks in the kitchen, there's the bathrooms around the corner.
Cold drinks in the fridge, by the way, if you want a cold.
Back over in the kitchen.
I'm live. You want to turn this around?
Oh, sure. We'll go chat.
Here we go. We're taking a little break. Maybe introduce yourself. We knew each other in Clubhouse, so I knew you by voice,
Yeah, we need
but
to
actually
voice.
not by sight. So why don't you introduce yourself to the viewers?
Hi, I'm Keith Koo. As Evan said, we met on Clubhouse. You're now the 7th person I've met.
7.
So I've met 350 Clubhousers in a year and a half, but you're the 7th person I met by voice alone. And I recognized your photo right away. So
That was
great to
pretty
meet
fun. So tell the viewers more about yourself, because you're kind of prolific here in the Valley,
you. Oh,
in the Bay Area. So give us a little.
Yeah,
little
so
bio.
Silicon Valley native Keith Koo. I spent too long in corporate, which I talk about all the time. And
I'm sorry for your loss.
No, it's great because now we're actually at an event with corporate types, and they're trying to actually move more towards catching up with influencers and really getting their names out, because the whole model of corporations is changing, and especially with technology like generative AI, which we've been talking about the last couple of days.
Nonstop generative AI. And you're a part-time or a casual investment banker, an angel investor? Is that
Yeah,
is that
so
right?
so
Okay.
after I left corporate, I started working. So I've been an angel for over a decade, but after I left corporate, I started becoming very active and also actively mentoring startups, and that led to working in investment banking.
So, is this the best of times or the worst of times for early stage startups? What's your take here in Silicon Valley Live as we speak on, give the date and the time, you know?
Thanks for that really nice question, Evan. You know what I'll say is this: great ideas and innovation are always great ideas and innovation. So if you get past the reality that 99% of ideas are not new, and we see that with ChatGPT or other generative AI. It's not the worst time to be a startup. In fact, some of the best companies, I quote say the best companies of the last 100 years, last 20 years, Amazon 20 years ago got to like $1, $2 a share.
Oh, why weren't you telling me about this at the time?
Well, I wouldn't be talking to you on your show right now if I knew about it at the time, right? So
that's right. You're a cheap date. Is that what you're trying to say?
For every pets.com, there's an Amazon, there's an eBay. So
but it was $1,000, a million to one, right? I mean, you couldn't have picked Amazon out of the crowd at the time.
I can't say exactly the location, but over a decade ago, Tesla was on the ropes,
right.
And I heard about the lobby. So anyway, best of times, worst of times. I think for just straight up startups, what we'll always tell you is if you have the luxury, keep 24 months of runway. We don't, from our wealth management division in our investment bank, as a general rule, we don't think there's a lot of angel or VC funding available until Q3 at the earliest because people want to see where the market shakes out. But if you've got an idea and a product, you've got revenue, you still got a really good shot.
So you also in your side, your nighttime job or your day job, I don't know which job it is, you have a radio show.
I have a radio show.
So tell us about the radio show. Is it real radio, internet radio, hybrid radio?
It's
actual radio. I can go in my car and tune in.
Yeah, the show is called Silicon Valley Insider.
Okay,
I'm in my 6th season. It's on what we say terrestrial radio
Terrestrial radio, wow.
Yeah, so
nice.
it goes on a transmitter here in the area, broadcasts.
Nice. I love it.
And I talk about investments, technology, having corporate types on there, book authors.
That is great.
Yeah.
And you take that and you chop it up and put it out as a podcast as well?
I don't chop it up. It's long form on podcasts. But
okay.
My resolution this year is to be more like Evan because I've just been doing this as a radio show. Imagine that. But I will be actually chopping it up and putting it more online.
That's awesome. So plug one of your ventures or your startups because I know we were talking earlier about one of your AI startups.
I got a few, but
what's top of mind that you want to broadcast out?
And thank you very much, Evan. So in terms of theme, there's a company called Kena.ai, Kena.ai. CEO's Freedom Preetham, very well known in the AI space for having run AI for Coursera, for Amobi. It is meant to be a better monetization platform for creators, such as if you think about Spotify and Patreon and how they take 30%.
Yeah.
Just to make it very simplified, if a creator was charging $50 or $100 for their art, we charge a 6% tax, quote unquote tax, in terms of services, and the creator gets 100% of what they charge.
That's wonderful. So I think music is a big use case, right?
It's music right now. It can do other forms of media, but we focused on music. Kena.ai, the mobile app is where all the 300,000 subscribers, organic subscribers are at.
Wow, that's a nice space.
Yeah.
It's really great. So the model's working. The creator economy economics are working. They're very happy musicians, right? Because most times musicians are unhappy with the way they're compensated.
The free component is Kena.ai on the mobile app will teach you how to play music for free. So there's like Chinese apps that charge. This is completely free. But the monetization, the creator economy side of it is definitely where you have the opportunity to upload music, do video courses. It handles almost anything except percussions right now. So if you're a drummer, you're kind of out of luck. But guitar, vocals, strings, reed, piano, you're good.
That's great. Now, I wish Spotify or Apple Music did something more creative, no pun intended. They really don't care much about the creators themselves, right? I mean, they're after the business dollars and advertising and the brand deals and the
We're going to see
record
change.
deals. Right.
I mean, getting to know Evan personally in the last couple of days, when we think about the gig economy, right, Fiverr just announced that they have a new category called AI art.
Really?
Yeah, 2 nights ago.
So that's interesting. So what's there? People who understand how to do prompt and manipulation really well?
So I've been playing around with AI art. So as I pull this up,
as has everyone, right?
Of course, I'm going to screw this up, right? So yeah, what I'm trying to say though is that the traditional gig economy, which mostly takes 30% or more of your creator rights, right? I drew that
Wow.
with Midjourney. That is an 8K rendering and Unreal Engine style, but I can see
And how long did the prompt or the manipulation take for you to build that?
Well, it was 48 hours between this earlier image, Gong Xi Fa Cai for
Okay.
all you
I saw that.
Lunar New Year
Happy
folks.
New Year, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how fast it took. Within 2 days, I went from this to that.
Isn't that going to disrupt the Fiverr people, the people doing creative work? I thought it's going to put them out of business because now you have the tools in your own hands and you can create your own graphical content, imagery, you can create videos yourself. Or is this an opportunity for these Fiverr folks or gig workers to use the tools? I guess it's going to be all over the map, right?
It's both. It's both, and the reason why it's both is because as much as I grew up in Silicon Valley, I'm really insecure as much as I talk about technology. But the reality is that a lot of people around the world, including for Cana users, they don't have access to the tools we have access to. They don't have the education. So Fiverr will still exist in that people. I mean, I just saw this the other day. First of all, I've come out of banking, compliance, and tech. So like just take free versions of software like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Whether you know it or not, and I'm not coming down on you, you don't actually have the rights to monetize it. You might do it and you might not get caught, but you don't technically have the IP rights to do that.
For ChatGPT right now.
For specifically the free version of ChatGPT,
Okay,
and most
note to self.
and most free versions of Midjourney or other things. Until you, like I use commercial versions of the software. I don't use ChatGPT, but I use commercial versions of software where I'm explicitly granted the intellectual property. So if you actually took my work, that would be a copyright violation. Why I say that is I see all these videos of people on YouTube saying this is how you monetize Midjourney, you put it out on Fiverr, you put it out on wherever.
Right.
And yeah, so they're doing it, but they're not doing it quote unquote within the terms of service. So I think there's a space for Fiverr. People who have no clue will pay somebody to do this art for them.
Yeah.
And then the early adopters, the first movers, will figure out that they don't need virtual assistants anymore. They don't need to do a lot of other things they used to do. I mean, that's funny. Like ChatGPT went down for the first time like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And already, how many people have dumped their virtual assistants because they already had moved their business model? And so I represent a commercial software, which I'm not shilling right now, but I had like 50 people ask me
Shill,
for the
please.
link. It's called. I'm not used to this, but it's called Satellite Rider. You can go to. You can.
So it's like a Jasper AI or Copy AI, but
Yeah,
better, different, or?
Email me at info@svin.biz and I'll get you a trial.
Okay.
But Silicon Valley Insider, so svin.biz. But Satellite Rider is originally an ad agency using AI to snipe Google and Bing traffic.
Oh, wow, neat.
And then they needed a copywriting tool because of all the scaling they were doing.
Right.
And so they created a copywriting tool. Like, oh, we should sell this. And this was like, 6 months before ChatGPT came out.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to get back to the show.
We are.
So,
Thanks a lot,
yeah,
Evan.
thanks for your time.
Yeah, and Evan's going to be on my show at some point.
Oh, we're going to do each other's.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Gordon, I think we can, oh, sorry, let's wait. A couple more, yeah, I didn't see them, but they're in the back room there. So after this session, we're going to have a couple things happen. We'll do a quick tour for anybody who wants to just do a quick walk around here. And then we will have some cocktails for anyone who can stay around 4 or so. I have an interview with somebody, but you guys can all enjoy and get started after Komi-san's done.
Yeah, so in other words, I'm the last one.
You are.
between You and Shanta.
Yes. And I've worn them out, and they worn me out, so I'm done.
You will not keep us away from our heart.
Sounds like a rule. Personal rule.
Don't be disrespectful.
No questions after the
Gotta be careful what you're saying, they're recording this, right? So no hot mic moments. Just waiting for one. Yeah, he's waiting, we're just waiting for him, but.
Oh.
We want to get started.
Okay, all right. Okay, so good afternoon again. So let me just jump into the next session, which is, as I think a lot of things have pushed to this presentation.
You noticed that?
Yeah, I kind of noticed the famous finishing word that Gomi-san is going to talk about it. So I have a lot of thing I have to cover. Well, let's see how well I can do. So just the first part. So I'm going. My intention here is to go a little bit deeper into the technical engineering perspective of IoT. So before going in there, I'm going to show you a couple of again those statistics that data is basically exploding. More data is being creating, and I don't think anyone can contest that the trend. Nobody knows these numbers are going to be correct, but I think the trend is there. That the more data is being created, and more transmission capacity is required, and storage space is required. That is the truth, and then no one can contest. And then, as we discussed a little bit yesterday, so we have to really come up with the technology to support those business requirements. At the same time, how do we manage the energy consumptions to support those things? And this is the kind of some forecasts that if we just stay on the same course of the current state, that we need so much more energy to support support the IT system as a whole. So we got to do something. So that's the kind of backdrop of that. And when you think about that, kind of similar thing. When you think about applications, obviously these emerging applications are obviously we see coming up. AR, VR, robotics, drones, and autonomous driving and so on. Especially AR, VR, we need more capacities and then the data. But everything else that is going to need more data storage capacities and so on. So, and then also another thing to look at is that on the right bottom, that technology, Moore's law, basically hitting the top. It's pretty much tippy-toeing for the last tapering that growth for the last definitely seeing that flattening that the growth in this area. So therefore, IWON is required. These ions is trying to address these things: lower power consumptions, higher capacity, and then a little bit of, I didn't talk too much, but the low latencies that to support those different new kind of emerging applications. Latency is becoming is becoming a problem. So we need to address these issues, and to address these issues, ION is the idea of ION is coming up, and then we've been working on it. And by the way, a little bit of we talked about power consumption concerns and so on. From the sustainability point of view, this is another area I would like to point out that like many other companies, NTT has put the goal for the sustainability, environmental sustainability side, that we want to become carbon neutral in 2040. And we tried to map out how do you get that, how do you achieve that, the carbon neutral stage in 2040. And then this is a map. I think it's pretty self-explanatory that we implement a lot of different energy saving initiatives, like putting LED lights or stuff like that, and the sensors in the office to turn off the light when nobody's there. All those kind of things is energy savings activities. And of course, like many other people, we start using the renewable energy, and that will reduce the carbon footprint. But we estimate those two alone, we're not going to get to the carbon neutral stage in 2040. We're going to do something more. And ION is important from that aspect as well. That basically how to reduce the consumption of the energy inside of the data center. So that's where the rest of the 45% is coming. So that's how important it is for us. I just want to point out that. Okay, so with that, let's start digging in a little bit of technology side. So Vito, I don't know if you know this or not, but Vito mentioned about all photonics network. So this is perhaps one of the most visible and iconic first service that for the ION. So let me just explain this one. All photonics network, well, as the word says, that everything is photonics, end to end, all the way. And I pointed out yesterday that the backbone network, or like submarine cables, for example, that's a good example, has been on optics for many, many years already. But, and then also FTTH is already, I think, in the service for the last 10 years or something. So what do you mean by all photonics network? Is probably some people may have a question. So in this case, what NTT is going to, NTT ION is proposing here is that the all photonics network end to end, basically dedicating the wavelength, one wavelength from one end to another. All the other existing services hasn't gone that far. There always some sort of conversion is happening.
So what if it goes through a switch? Do you still maintain the wavelength there, or does it still get its own wavelength off the hop?
So that's the key. It sounds like, so if you dedicate the same wavelength end to end, it won't scale. So we do have a technology to convert one wavelength to another wavelength. So it may not be the same exact color, red coming in here and then maybe green coming out over here. But it's a dedicated, basically the wavelength. And then we can do the switching in the middle. But all the way here end to end, And by doing so, basically open up the full capacity, full basically capabilities of the light, or the optics, in this case. Yeah.
So the wavelength is fully dedicated to you, don't time multiplex it with other
No,
customers?
no, it's not.
Okay. So yeah, it's fully leased.
It's a fully, yeah. It's up to you how you use it. So that's the very, this is very new services. And we are starting this service in Japan from March this year. Certainly at the beginning it's a very limited coverage and everything, but this is the first in the world that this level of the level. And well, just for those who may or may not may know that basically this is to the end users. This looks like a dark fiber, and then you can just get put the one light, and then on the other end you get the same light coming out. So dark fiber, yes, with the if you buy a dark fiber, you can get the same thing. But with the APN, a difference from the dark fiber is that you can really select other users who are on the other end of your services and so on. So this is basically in a nutshell the APN. A lot of and then the engineers add a few interesting features into it, and one of it that I thought kind of interesting is latency adjustment. What does that mean? Is that well, initially it's just a point-to-point, but over the next phase we are planning to do the point-to-multipoint approach, and then when it comes to the point-to-multipoint approach, this latency adjustment is that everybody gets the same latencies from end to end. So obviously in this case you cannot make it faster, so you can make some of the link a little bit slower. That's the only thing you can do because of law of physics. But by doing that such adjustment, you can just everybody gets the fair connectivity.
Is that for financial services then?
Financial services or gaming. I don't know how big of a requirement this is going to be. Gaming or esports.
You can't tell gamers that you're adding latency to their connection.
But well, fair games, yeah. It's like if it's Olympics, first lane and 8 lanes are the same distance. Basically, that's the same thing. Anyway, so that's the APN or photonics network that we are going to release. And again, this is the first service that under the umbrella of the IO project. What we are assuming as a use case of APN, I've already talked a little bit about esports, certainly that's coming up, but one of the first very more serious kind of mainstream kind of application we're looking at is what they call telemedicine. So in this case, to do the remote operations of there's devices already out there that is called Kinotori or DaVinci or some vendors who has those remote operating medical basically devices available. But with this APN, always the problem has been that, as you can imagine, that these operations, those devices requires very fine motions, and then to do that, a little bit of latency from the network matters for the physician's point of view. And at this shorter latencies will eliminate that hurdle. So we're definitely planning to really apply the use case to use the hospital and different doctors to see how much more that useful this is going to be. But this is certainly one of the first ones.
Didn't they say 5G was gonna fix that?
I'm sorry?
All right. Can't do that these days, no.
In that, so APN Spec 1 or whatever, does that support failover?
I'm sorry?
Does it support failover?
Failover.
Because in this situation, if you want to, due to free communication and some of your hardware goes down, obviously
Oh,
have to
right.
find a different route, which may be nocturnally specific.
It may not be the same
And
latency, yeah.
there's no point just sending an email to say your network is down when you're in the middle of something.
In the middle of
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's the next step.
Okay.
That's the next step.
No, that's actually a really good question that he brought out, okay? This is a use case that they said was promised for 5G. So, if you're briefing ION is going to deliver this use case, what's the difference? What value, if you believe 5G is supposed to deliver this use case, what else is ION giving me?
This is a physical only connection, not a wireless connection.
Not the wireless, but that's actually, yeah, good question.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. Nobody cares if it's wired or wireless, right?
They do for digital communication. When you're dealing with digital latency.
All I'm saying is that I'm seeing this use case again, that's supposed to be solved by 5G. So is this ION with 5G? Is it ION with 6G? Is this ION with any G? I mean,
I guess, you know, I was being sarcastic about the fact that this is like one of the many presentations. The difference is we've, 5 years have already proven that, the 5G promise was just a promise. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then in reality, yeah, I think you hit the good point. It definitely, yeah, this is typically one of the use cases of 5G to promote the low latencies.
Right.
So I guess something I can say is that this is certainly when you try to sell the low latency, this is one of the first use cases continuously coming up. So yes, you can use 5G or you can use this one, either way. And then probably,
5G was a lie.
and then the reality is that this is the ultimate low latency, even lower than the 5G. So perhaps that the more level of details that you can see that depending upon the type of operations you do from the medical standpoint, some of them are, if you're doing, say, I'm not a medical doctor, but potentially doing the surgery on the brain versus surgery on the, say, just cutting the intestine or something like that. Probably the precision requirement is different. So I think that's the level of details that we have to kind of go into. I think both of them telemedicines, but I'm not necessarily convincing that way, but this could be for the brain surgery. And then 5G is more of just cut the code or something like that.
You don't need that.
It's just your colon, you don't need ION for that.
4G's for your ankle.
Yeah, 4G might be pulling that or something, So something, yeah. Does it make sense? So.
Yeah. I was just being sarcastic.
Yeah,
We'll allow 5G to stream to Spotify music or something for the doctors, and we'll ensure that this does
Yeah,
the
I
real
mean,
trick.
yeah.
yeah, but that's a good point. I didn't think about it, but you're right. And similarly, maybe probably the same argument exists for the remainder of my presentation of the use case, but smart factory, similar thing that how those low latencies and in this case that the higher bandwidth also really the key, and then esports. That's something I talked about. We can do that again. and adjustment of the latency may be an interesting attribute to it. And also to be probably more likely scenario is this one that between data centers that we right now everybody uses the dark fiber. That we have much more flexibilities of data center connectivities and so on. And it's not written here, but a little bit different use case that NTT R&D has done, and I thought that was pretty cool. Maybe we can show you at the exhibit in March that I just talked about. We did the concert, the remote concert. There is a conductor sitting one locations and all that, violinist over there, and so on. Is that?
Yeah. So that will be here. So will the gaming, and so will the remote surgery. All three will be here.
Yeah.
We're looking for volunteers for the remote surgery.
I didn't want to it's definitely lacing.
How about we start with like a hair? Let's go simpler.
And those will be, just so you know, those will be demos of what we saw in Japan were actually an action. They're bringing the systems over, but obviously we don't have the network here because they've already built that out. So the gaming that happened in Japan, because there's a small version that they're testing on direct, but you'll see what was happening in the devices.
Okay, so that's APN. Again, that this is the end-to-end, basically the full capabilities of the optic network is kind of open up to the users. And it's more flexibilities attached to it compared to the dark fiber. So you can just, it's more like the network, well, it's like a network services. You can choose the destination that you're connected to. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, changing a gear for a different aspect of the technology, photonics or electronics convergences. So this one is, we have a couple of generations. Obviously, eventually, all photonics chips is something I'll touch upon a little bit. But this is the current roadmaps that we have laid out. Already we are going to release this one that with the network, basically NIC, the network interface chips that we are using that photonics a lot bigger. As you can see that within the DSP, well, it's getting more and more details, but before this one, well, today's network interface card is that optics, and then there's the huge electronics piece called DSP, digital signal processing. But we just use the more optics into the some of the process being done by the DSP, and by doing that, we can again lower the energy consumptions and then speed and so on. So that is coming up. We are actually, this is the one that we are working with that Intel, and so I think back to your questions here. But this is something going on, but take that technology to the next step for the coming years. And we are looking at in 2 years down the road, the intra board, the connections, and then 4 years after that, intra chips, the connections of the optics, and then finally, in 10 years down the road, within the chips, more more extensive use of the optics in it. So these are the steps that we are looking at, and then these are the timelines that we are looking at. And so impact of those, each phase of that stuff is written here, and we just tentatively call that IO 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and so on. you may, we may be different towards I-1 4.0. We may change the directions or the timeline may be different, but this is the current the plan that the R&D team has. And then this is based upon all that I-1 Global Forum partners like Intel and then other players in the semiconductor space. And just Vito talked a little bit about disaggregated computing. So this can be done in I-1 2.0. Once I-1 2.0 is achieved, this can be achieved from the system-wise. Let me just explain a little bit about this disaggregated computing. Today's server farm, so to speak, is that on the left-hand side. So each box of servers has CPU, GPU, memories, and everything in it. And you just stack them within the data centers. And when you look at, when you dissect what's going on within the servers, depending upon the applications, say the CPU can be the bottleneck. And on a different application, GPU can be the bottleneck. So in today's architecture, depending upon, obviously, if you find a bottleneck, you just add the servers to remove the bottleneck. What that means is that you may overinvest, you may end up over-investing into other parts. If a CPU is bottleneck and then buying more servers, and then GPU might be, some of the GPU might be kind of empty in the load, and so on, and vice versa. So that's the reality, and this aggregated computing will allow that to basically more flexibilities on those capacity management. So if I think you get it that on a disaggregated system, there's a bunch of GPU, there's a bunch of memory, there's a bunch of CPU. So depending upon what you need, what is the bottleneck, you can just add that particular piece into the mix. And then we have an optical interconnect. So we get really overall as a system, it works. And then, and again, the flexibility is there.
Yeah, everything you were saying translates to NTT focusing on the physical protocol. Are you at all concerned about the data protocol? Because what you've described is essentially CXL. Yeah, I've just looked on the CXL website and NTT isn't a member, so.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Well, it's the same directions. Yeah. So I guess this is not the super new concept. I guess that the CXL we're borrowing the concept. Yeah.
Well, yeah, CXL is the data protocol, but what you sounds like is you're purely focusing on the physical protocol.
Yeah, and then it's more like the CXL, some sort of protocol obviously need to be there to support this, but here's, I'm talking about is that once I-1 2.0 is achieved, this kind of system, from the hardware perspective, should be easier to implement, and through the protocol of CXL.
Yeah, so I can totally understand this, and I think it's really cool. I'm just kind of wondering, like, what time frames do you really see this happening in realistically? Like, I presume that you could replace PCIe today with some sort of optical interface and get started with this pretty quickly without necessarily have like circuit-to-circuit connectivity, but having an optical backbone and then connecting with some of the existing protocols maybe. If every unit, like the memory, everything would have some sort of interface to optical in addition to what we're totally currently have, right? But do you think that's where we're going? Are you more interested in creating a whole new standard with a whole new software stack, as Ian was suggesting? Because honestly, I could see this happening within 2 or 3 years, like even on a gaming PC.
Yeah.
Especially if Intel's involved, and
Yeah,
are
yeah.
the only ones maintaining really this level right now in terms of gaming PCs?
Yes, and you are right, that in reality, yeah, these areas that the current server is evolving, and then more optical devices are used within the servers. So that's already probably happening. But not real, but we believe that one of the big advantage is that disaggregating the different pieces, and we can just use more efficiencies as a system we can achieve. So that's to get there, you really need to move on to this one. But just to gain the speed and then gain the within this box, if you want to gain the speed and gain energy efficiencies, maybe you can, as a first step, you can get the optical PCI bus, and then start from there.
Quick question. Switching to photonics would be better for miniaturization or worse in its current stage?
Miniaturization?
Yeah, so obviously our phones, our chips keep getting smaller.
Right.
Like, the transition towards photonics would require bigger hardware at the moment, or is it actually even better for miniaturization?
Even better for, we believe even better for the miniature, the yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even smaller products.
Right, but, but certainly, eventually, yes, we can. But there is certainly technical work needs to be done to make it small. Yeah.
And this being obviously more power efficient requires
Yes.
less batteries, less.
Exactly, right.
Gotcha.
So Gomi-san, one of the things that this would also be able to do is you can do this over distance. So it's not just in a box, right? When you have a photonics network, now you can actually disaggregate these over distances.
Ideally, ideally. And then, yes.
If you have an APN.
If you have APN, potentially, this server farm is sitting in California, and then next one is in Chicago or something like that. It's technically possible if you really want to do it.
Well, for resource management, right? So you can move loads in a different way than you do it today.
Okay. So, interesting.
So one of the issues with this distributed cloud gaming, for example, is you have to have a data center every 1,000 miles or so, because you can't beat the speed of light. Have you got any problems to solve that?
No. Probably we're not going to solve that problem. Okay, so, and this is a little bit beyond IWAN to 2030. But I talked a little bit yesterday, and this is something my team is working on in NTT Research. This is definitely a part of the basic research. But, well, I think everyone was at the last night's session, and I talked a little bit about what's beyond silicon photonics. And this is it, that further down the road, after silicon photonics, we are looking at the device called lithium niobate instead of silicon. Use that for the photonics layer. And you can really create that transistors, and you can create basically all sorts of nonlinear devices you can create on the photonics layer. So that's what we are looking at. Those devices, the lithium niobate is the material everybody knows, and we use that for today's photonics optical communications for modulators and so on. But it requires a bit of energy. But we recently found the way to minimize the energy requirements of that. So we can create the thin film of this device, and then you should be able to integrate it, create the integrated circuits. Put the optical layers on top of the silicon. Well, it's same as silicon photonics. Put that on the silicon instead of optical silicon layers. Use that lithium niobate. And then lithium niobate, like I said, has a lot of nonlinear features to it. So you can create the transistors and modulators and oscillators even. So you can really super integrate everything on the chip.
Electrical transistors or optical transistors?
Optical.
Okay. So interferometers. Interferometers.
Oh yeah, interferometers. Yeah. So that's coming up after 2030. Yeah. So that's beyond I-1 5. But just wanted to touch upon. And then finally, from a technical point of view, digital twin computing. I think this is, many people may know about this digital twin computing. It's a concept that how to really simulate the physical thing into the computer simulations. I think the best known example, good example, is the jet engines simulators. I think a Siemens or somebody has done that. You know that the jet engine, when it is created, it's the same spec of the jet engines. But when you install the jet engines to the different planes, then each jet engine will take a different trajectory on their life, depending upon of course, the length of the flight, or the speed of the flight, speed of the taking off, or the temperature of the environment and so on. Depending upon those parameters, that each jet engine may have a different part of wears and tears. So that's the nature of the physical thing, and the computer simulation of the digital twin will track those matters. So the jet engine we can do the preventive maintenance of the jet engine more correctly. So you don't have to wait till things get break down, and you can really make the preventive maintenance more precisely. So that's the whole idea of digital twins, and we are also embarking of that other thing. And then to make those digital twin computing happening, everything needs to be more connected, and then we need more high power computations and so on. So the all photonics networks and those server infrastructure that I talked about, it's another, I think, a use case of the applications. So in this, we are thinking about many different the digital twin technologies here. So, and one of the example here is that the whole city we put the digital twin, and in this case that food waste, the track, and then also the predict that the food waste, and then also some other things are air conditionings and so on. This is something going on with one of the Japanese major city, Nagoya, for this thing. And Vito also mentioned about the urban development is part of NTT Group. So we are, in a way, can do something like this using our own, basically the group companies' capabilities.
Have you tried making a digital twin of the stock market?
I'm sorry?
Tried making a digital twin of the stock market?
Stock market? Oh, that's...
I mean, the whole point about, a bit facetious, but the whole point about digital twins is being accurate and being predictive. And one of the hardest things to be accurate and be predictive of is the stock market.
Yes.
Because,
And then there's no physical thing either. So I'm not sure if stock market is a good
But that's a good example of, by itself, stock market doesn't exist on its own. So is a good predictive model when you have the stock market, the war in Russia, or the war in Ukraine, the pandemic, like bringing digital twins of all these things together, and then saying, okay, now predict the stock market.
So you're considering digital twins, in essence, individually closed systems that can be interacting with each
Right.
other at a highest level.
Right, and they have to be in real time, because if you don't have real time, you can't predict. So that's our different, slightly different kind of spin. Again, all leading back to photonics is you're gonna need a very high speed, low latency capacity to have simultaneously real-time digital twins that are not even in the same place. So,
And then one of the digital twin that a little more futuristic thing that we are working on is the human body's digital twin. So you see that scenario from there, right? You can just predict that the sickness that you may get within a year or something like that. We are working on that, the digital twin, basically technology into your heart and the cardiovascular system. So that we'll probably show you
Indeed.
that cardiovascular biodigital twin at the March exhibit. Okay.
I think another point to make is we'll also be having the lithium niobate.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big part.
I guess that's it from my point of view. A bit shorter than Vito's, I guess.
so again, this is a vision. You know, other than the one that's coming up in March, these are all visions. They're not 100% products, and they're not even close to products. So we're all trying to we're positioning this as here's what it could look like, and we want to bring people along with that story. And not all of it will happen, but some of it happens. It's going to be awesome.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right, we're going to